Now that we have started using dynamic component to implement our routing, we can actually drastically simplify the logic for scrolling the page to current timeline item when we navigate to the timeline page. And currently, in order to do that, we actually do the following thing. We use watchPostEffect function inside the timeline component. And anytime current page reactive variable changes, this closure runs again. And if we're currently navigating to the timeline page, this condition will turn true. And before actually scrolling the page to current timeline item, we wait until Vue will apply all updates to the DOM, and only after we're calling scroll to current hour function to scroll the page to current timeline item. But now, since we are displaying only one page component at once, by using that dynamic component inside the root component, there is another hook that Vue provides us with called onActivated that will perfectly fit our current scenario. So let's just use this hook in here. Let's call onActivated function. This function accepts a closure, and this closure will be executed over and over again whenever we're gonna switch to the timeline page. So whenever our current the timeline component will become activated, in other words, when that dynamic component that is currently used inside the root component to implement the routing will display the timeline component, this closure will be executed again, and once we are on the timeline page, we can easily call scroll to hour function to scroll the page to current timeline item, like this. And just to make sure that this closure will be executed, we're also placing here simple console log statement. So now, let's just remove watchPostEffect usage, we no longer need it. And also, let's remove a couple of imports. And of course, we'll also have to import our new function onActivated from the Vue package. And now we are ready to check this behavior in the browser. So when I initially will load a timeline page, right away in the console, we're gonna see that log activated. And this log is only going to appear whenever we're gonna navigate to the timeline page. So once again, let's just go to the timeline page and make sure that we're gonna see another activated log entry. And of course, as we can see, we are instantly scrolled to current timeline item. But if we are going to go back and comment out this call and check it again, then we're gonna see that the page is not scrolled when navigating to timeline page, and the scroll bar stays at the top. So let's just go back and remove that comment, as well as this console log statement. And also what we can do with this expression is simplify it a little bit. We can just pass the reference to that function that onActivated function should execute, and since we only have to execute scroll to current hour function, we can just specify a reference like this. But also we have to specify first parameter, which is false. But in this case, there is no way to do this. So let's see how we can overcome it. And thankfully, this is pretty simple to do. We just have to go back to the implementation of scroll to current hour function and change the default value for the first parameter. Let's use false. And with that, we need to adjust one function call that is inside of logo component. So let's go in here and pass first parameter true. Because now, as a default value of the first parameter, we're using false, so we have to pass here true explicitly. And now back to the timeline component. And in here we can easily remove that commented code, and now we end up with such notation. So as we can see, we were able to drastically simplify implementation of this component. So one more time, let's check this behavior in the browser, and make sure that after navigating to the timeline page, our page will always be scrolled to current timeline item. Everything is perfectly working. So we will continue development in the next lesson.